Welcome back, everybody, to We Are TPM with myself, Kyle Teixeira. Sitting across from me again is John Teixeira.
Hello.
This week, we are back to talk about the cost of operating an STR. We talked to you last week about the cost of setting up an STR or Airbnb. This week, we're going to get a little general and dive into the cost of operating an Airbnb or STR. So before next week, where we will dive into the specific numbers of a setup and operations from our own experience and rentals.
So, that's good. This is right up your alley, Kyle.
No, I don't know. I'm not very experienced in it.
This is what you do every day. So I'm going to defer on this topic. I'm going to defer a lot to you and your expertise, because while we both do this together, right? We both kind of are really good at staying in our lane, right? And this is your lane. So
try to make my lane. We drive straight all the time. No, I'm just kidding. We have more of a highway, or can't all be on the same.
Just get you a Tesla; it'll drive itself.
Well, step one, check. So let's see, cost of operating an STR. So there's a lot of costs depending on if you're self-managing, even if you have a management company. But we're going to talk about just the cost of operations, regardless. So the first one we will talk about is marketing. You don't think of it that much as marketing, because when we talk about an Airbnb, normally people think, well, it's on Airbnb. Airbnb does the marketing. That's true to a point. They distribute and show and market your listing, but your listing needs to be marketable to start with.
Well, that would be like selling a house and saying it's on Zillow.
Zillow did it all.
So it's on Zillow.
Would you give Zillow an address?
Yeah, so Zillow would. So most people will find it on Zillow, but not everybody will find it on Zillow, and it's about exposure. It's about more eyeballs, the better.
So one thing I describe often to people and clients is that one way the Airbnb or any of these vacation rental sites is a lot different than Zillow, even in its comparison, is it's a search engine. Okay, Zillow could be a search engine too. So let's just get away from that comparison. Is the marketability of your listing is kind of like the marketability of your website on Google. It needs to have SEO, which everybody loves to throw out. That's search engine optimization, and the things you do in that listing really do matter. And they get into the cost. You can pay somebody to make sure your SEO. It takes a lot of knowledge and expertise to know what Airbnb wants. And while I know a lot of those things, keeping it general, you want professional photography. You get knocked up for having it. You get knocked down for not having it. The keywords and descriptions and all the same things that you can talk about in SEO. This isn't an SEO podcast, so I won't get into that. But there's a lot of cost and time that it takes to set that up properly and make sure that you have a marketable and in turn a profitable listing.
Yeah, and it starts. You mentioned professional photography. It always starts there. And this is the same conversation I have with my buyers and sellers, right? About, or mostly my sellers, about selling their home. It's like there's an upfront cost to getting professional photography. I can go on my iPhone or my Android and take awesome pictures. It's never going to be anywhere close to what a professional photographer can do with their expertise, with the filters they have on their cameras, especially for the short-term rentals. We have a lot of like close-up pictures that we do, faded out and stuff, and it's kind of cool. I find myself shaking my head all the time at almost all of the listings that we compete against. Almost everyone, dark, crappy photos from the corner of the room, horrible photography. Yeah,
and even if you ignore those obvious human things that get recognized by people like us and pretty much everybody looking, it's a website. What's the website looking for? Well, ironically, it's looking for a ton of photos. Like all these vacation sites, especially Airbnb, they want
photos the better.
The better. They want to make sure that the people looking there's less questions, right? When you're renting a short-term rental, you're not buying a house or renting. You don't get square footage. You don't necessarily get these statistics of the house that can show you that photos are misleading. Okay, these photos look a little bit stretched, right? Okay, well, this is $1,000 or 1,000 square foot house. This probably isn't as big as it looks to me. Well, in short-term renting, you don't really get that. You don't get to see that this cabin is 4,000 square feet. It may be 1,000 square feet. Those stats aren't advertised. So having a lot of photos that show those things is important. So the cost of the photography and doing it right and doing it good is very important, and keeping them up to date. You know, you run these things over years, you need new photos. You know,
with drone photography sometimes.
Yeah, and we'll get into how things change, but you know, your listing will always change. There will always be something that you have to.
We're having
update.
to reshoot one of ours right now because we got all new docks and boat ramp and all new stuff.
We've upgraded listings. We didn't like the style anymore. We wanted it, you know, there were maybe at the front end you didn't have the money to set it up how you wanted it. Now a year later you do. So you reshoot it. Another thing that these websites like. So these are just some tools really that go into marketing and costs of operating is like content management systems. We use them. I won't get it too much into them, but there's systems that will manage your content and keep it the same over multiple platforms. So like say, you know, I added a hairdryer to the bathroom. You should start with one, but let's just use that as an example. We added a hairdryer. We need to now go put on AirBNB that we have a hairdryer. Now we need to go on VRBO, but we have a hairdryer. Now we go to booking.com. Now we have a hairdryer. Now we go to our own website. We have a hairdryer. No, you want a system that lets you just go put, we added a hairdryer, and it syndicates that out to, you know, the things accordingly. And I'll keep that one very general. We could go on a whole topic of content management systems, but
we spend a lot of money on this stuff because we have a lot of listings. So these things save us a ton of time, right? And they're necessary for us to run our business as efficiently and as professionally as possible.
Yeah, and that's
what if I had one though? If I had one Airbnb, I wouldn't be able to afford to do all the stuff that we do. It wouldn't make sense.
There's a big market out there for things like content management systems. Some that target one unit owners, and some that target multiples. For example, the one we use now, if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, the cost wouldn't be worth it. You wouldn't get, right? But the one we started with years ago was targeted towards 1, 2, 3, and it was perfect, you know. And I've seen that system has developed into something even better than it was when we used it. So just knowing that there is some out there for all sections, like the one we currently have wouldn't work if we had 300, you know. Maybe it would, but we'd probably be looking for a different one. So in addition to the content management is research tools. This isn't, I'd say, something you absolutely need, but it's definitely a cost of operating. There's no way you set this thing up and operated it and determine pricing and all that without ever doing a speck of research. Even at Google that says, you know, what's this area get, and looking at other things. Sure, that's a free one, but it's still research. But there's research tools that show you the back-end data of all the listings on Airbnb, on VRBO. And these research tools can really help you compare, find out where your listing lands in the market, which is important to maximizing your daily rates, your occupancy, and actually, because you don't want to fit yourself into the wrong place of the market. If you have a beautiful luxury listing and you put it at the bottom, it's going to get bookings, but you're not going to get money, and vice versa. If a crappy listing gets sectioned at the top of, you know, quality listings, then you're not going to make any money or occupancy. So
when we get a client that calls us and says, hey, I've got this house, or I'm thinking about buying this house to do short-term rental on, right? What do you think? That's the first thing we do is we go to our tool. It's a common tool that everybody uses, but everyone likes to use the free version, and they don't pay for the real meat and bones of it, right? And so, but we're able to go in and do exactly like you said. Look at, is this area oversaturated? That's the first thing we want to see, right? Like, are there too many listings in this area for us to start a new one? Maybe sometimes we'll still do it because we know we'll blow everyone else out of the water if it's just a bunch of crappy listings, right? But still, we want to know what's happening in this area. Is it oversaturated? What's happening with pricing? And we can give our client a really conservative estimate on what we think they will make over an entire year with the ebb and flows of the seasons, right?
Yeah, and then we can use, you know, we do deeper dives after that into pricing tools, and I can get actual data on what we're going to charge and what we're going to make. And, you know, we try to beat those conservative estimates because, you know, you got to know what you're competing with. And
that's what I always tell people when we look at those. It's like It's like what I do as a realtor. I find what we call comps, right? So we find comparable homes, right? That match the home that we're looking to sell. That's kind of what this system is doing, the same thing. It's finding other homes in the area. They're also doing short-term rentals and giving you some comparable figures. But when I look at those homes, almost every time, Kyle, well, it's starting to get a little bit better. There's more professional companies out there doing this, but
because you're looking at other businesses.
Yeah, but
business units is what they all are.
I would still say more than half, at least, are horrible looking listings by do-it-yourselfers. And I'm not putting people down for trying to do it themselves. I'm just saying that we're going to crush them. With all the tools we have and with the presentation that we give it, we're going to crush over half of those listings.
Yeah,
I almost discount the bottom half.
Sometimes it comes down to like just for professional photography. You're saving yourself a couple $100, and you're losing yourself thousands. I guarantee it. So, from there, the marketing matters. The marketing is it's not just the starting point. It's the most important piece from the start and throughout. We're going to get into how to make it, the day-to-day and all that stuff is what makes it, gives it longevity. But if you want to start a short-term rental or operate one, you can't just ignore the marketing. You can't just expect it. Airbnb is going to do all the work. Well, Airbnb will tell you very specifically what you need to do to improve marketing, but not all of them will. So,
okay, quick example. When we started our first Orange Beach listing, we right off the bat, we booked in that thing like crazy. And it amazed me because when I would there's 186 units in our complex. So I'm not even talking all of Orange Beach. If I only hone my search down to our complex, we came up like on page 8 or something like that. Like, how do people get to page 8? I imagine that there's filters that we're using that were getting us up higher or something. I don't know. But my point was getting that thing to rise to the top became our goal, right? And doing all the things we're talking about, and we're going to talk about to get to the top of the list. So you're not on page 8. You're on page 1 or 2 is enormous for your revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's it starts with reputation management too, and pricing and all this stuff. It's a beautiful balance that you have to go through and know what you're doing to actually succeed. A lot of that comes down to your day-to-day operations. We're talking about the cost of operating. The day-to-day things build that reputation, that build off the foundation to make it a listing that will have longevity. So, the obvious one is cleanings, right? Are cleanings a big deal in operating an STR?
Yes.
I'd argue they're the make or break. They really are.
A bad cleaning crew will kill you, and a good cleaning crew will make you look like roses.
And we've experienced both. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest journeys we've been on is cleaning. And we could talk for days about cleaners, whether we've hired them out, we've had them third party, we've had them third party, but a member of our team. We've created our own in-house cleaning crew and to operate them, and then.
Now we do all of it, don't we?
Yeah, now we do all of it. So now I have all bases covered. But and then it's just like anything else in business. You need good people. Sometimes you just got to keep. It's never perfect. You just got to keep trying until you get good people. And at the end of the day, sometimes your reputation gets the best once you find those good people. Because it's the little things. It's the little things with the cleanings that. And we call them cleanings right now. We really call them turnovers, because it's not just cleaning. It's, linens and supplies and making sure that things are checked for the next guest, that the previous guest didn't mess up and, whatever it may be. But if that goes really well, like say the cleaning and turnover goes really well, it goes noticed. Because, and then the guest is like, it was very clean, and it's clear that they set this up for us. They folded the towels a certain way, blah blah blah. Those things get noticed and get positive responses, and maybe it helps them ignore something little that if it were dirty, those get significantly negative. It does also get noticed, and then now they notice other things, and then a splash of paint somewhere where it shouldn't be now is dirty to people instead of it's just a mishap. So That's your make or break it, because let's say that's 1 star difference, right? So you're either getting 5 stars, you're getting 4 stars. You do that 100 times.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, you're on page 1 or you're on page 27, you know? Because people think getting 4 stars is hard. 4 stars, people, I'd say most people tend to want to help others and give them good feedback. You know, like you take an Uber, most of these Uber drivers have like a 5.0. Well, you know, and like 12,000 rides or whatever. It's because unless something happened, which is less likely in a car ride, unless something negative happened, you're inclined to give positive feedback, or none, right? None or positive. Where in short-term rentals, I don't think that's specifically true, but even if people are unhappy, it'll average out to like a 4. You want it to average out to a 5.0, or as close as you can get to it, because that. And it ties into the marketing. That's where operations and marketing really come together.
Because you get good feedback. You get good feedback from the best feedback you get, whether it's positive or negative, is from your guests.
Yes.
And you're like, you know what? Shoot, you're right. We didn't realize that the potholders were all missing. We missed that. Like, and a guest says, it would have been nice to have some potholders. Gosh, let's go get some potholders.
It's not just noticed, it's noticed on the front end too. So like a lot of these guests have probably read most of your reviews before staying with you. So if they saw that, you know, there was this issue, and then they get there and they see that it's still an issue, and they're like, okay, well, this host didn't really care to fix it. It's not like they weren't told. They can see publicly that you were told.
Exactly. Good point.
And you know, but I've also had that become a very positive experience, because they tell us after the fact, like, hey, I saw this review about this thing and I was worried about it, but it's very clear that you guys not only addressed it, you went above and beyond and got rid of it or whatever, made it better. That makes them feel like, you know,
like you care.
This is
more than just a money generating thing.
Exactly. You're providing an experience. Like if there's, it's very rare in these days, but you know, when we were starting out, it was a little less rare when problems would occur. And when you actually impact someone's experience or their vacation, and like it's significant, like that, we care. Like it would significantly bother us if, like, say they're here for a wedding and they had to spend 5 seconds thinking about something that wasn't even having to do with that. You know, that's not what they booked your experience for. Right. So that's a cost that's worth taking. You know, making sure that you give that extra effort, you know, extra labor, pay that extra person to make sure that the guest experience is what you're offering.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because there is literally 4 of us on our team that monitor guest experience. Now, some of us aren't doing much, right? We're just monitoring it and kind of backing each other up, right? And see who gets to it first. Like,
well, you can't put 4. You can't put 4 to it, right? That's 4 overseeing it. We got other, you know, I have my crews that execute for us, maintenance crew, all these other people that help tie this all together. But yeah, you're right. That sounds excessive.
There's a lot of labor hours that go into it. Even if one person was doing it, they would be putting a lot of hours into doing it.
And one person, and the reason we have so many helping out with the oversight part is it's speed to action. You know, like exactly. It doesn't matter if 4 people see the same thing come in. One of us is going to address it, right?
The one positive feedback we get on our reviews consistently with almost every review is about responsiveness. And that's for 2 reasons. One, what we just talked about, the 4 of us overseeing it. And 2, the automation tools and stuff that you've put in place create an extremely responsive system that guests really enjoy it and appreciate it.
They do, because you give them all the information they need, take questions out of their mouth unless things happen. And then when things happen, you address it.
That's right.
Speed to action, right?
So that's another cost, operation, right?
Yeah.
All that automation, all the labor that goes into, I mean, even if you're doing it yourself and it's your place, your time is worth something.
Your time's worth a lot, actually. Your quality of life is worth a lot. You know, because you put all these efforts in, like, you know, when we were starting this, you know, you put all these, it's a lot to set all this up, right? And to get it right and whatever. But if you put all this work into one and it's so degrading to you that you don't want to do 2 or 3 or 4 after that.
Could you imagine if we didn't put in place the automation that you put into place for messaging, just that one thing alone. Could you imagine what a nightmare it would be to do the amount of vacation rentals that we do today with the amount of messaging that we would have to manage? I mean, you've created a system that has allowed us to minimize the amount of messaging that we manually have to do back to guests.
And we used to do it, so I can imagine.
I know. It's one listing would create, every inquiry had questions that have standard questions that have standard answers.
And it's dynamic. It's great because you learn from experience, right? Yep. It's not like I just made this messaging system and automations one day and it was like, boom, we're off to the races.
Always changing.
No, it's always been getting better and changing, and we've learned things, and like timing is everything. You don't want to blast people with everything they need. You do, but you want them to get it when they need it. That's what makes automations and messaging effective. Like when you book, you get a timeline. That's it.
That's
like you will get this information. Here's when you'll get it. You'll no longer ask me that question. Then you get a confirmation of all the, the rules, acknowledgments, the things that you need to know. I need you to know, but like you can just read it all at booking and you're cool with it. Boom. And because you're also recognizing that most people don't know this, but I know this on the front end, that you, or on the back end, that you only have 48 hours to cancel those reservations free of charge. Regardless of the host cancellation policy, the website's not giving you that feedback unless you cancel in the first 48 hours. That's not advertised. Why would they advertise that, right? That's why you need that information within the time you book. You need the stuff that might make you cancel right when you book. You don't need to know how the TV works or all this stuff.
Or the address.
The address. When you're asking me for the address, I'm thinking you're trying to put it on a party invitation, So, but all these things, timing has made it so important. It's what makes it so efficient. So if I blasted everybody with the house rules and not the rules, but like the house rules and the instructions and where to go, how to get in, all this stuff, like 7 months before you actually show up, now you're just going to be looking for it later. So, yeah. The cost of messaging and communication is one of the biggest pieces of this operations. So, like I hear, I talked to a lot of, in Orange Beach specifically, we talked to a lot of like self-managed people and people who don't have a management company, and they don't want to spend the few bucks. In retrospect, few bucks monthly or, handful of dollars monthly that it takes to have this automation system, or the hour that it may take you per month to set it up and upkeep it. But they will spend 20 minutes during their family dinner on a Friday night communicating with guests.
I've got a good friend that says he sits on the couch every night and he opens up his laptop and he goes through all his pricing and the calendars for the upcoming month, and he manually adjusts the pricing how he thinks it needs to be adjusted based on the upcoming events, and he does this nightly.
Yeah, and I, in very nice terms, told him that while you're doing that, I have a tool that is undercutting those prices by a few dollars, and
I'm the one getting the booking.
And I'm the one getting the booking. Yep. So, I'm sorry, that's business, but but it's just like the messaging thing, which is one of the only things people really think about. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to message around with people. Sure, that's a way of keeping it very general. But think about when people book vacation rentals. The most inconvenient times for you: Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning. It's not during the time that you want to be messaging people during the day. It's when you're probably spending time with your family or whatever, which we deal with, of course, but having that minimized is, I'd say, it's a value. It's one of the costs that is definitely worth it. We speak a lot about people's time here, and, what's the cost of your time? So labor, more of the day-to-day things is like replenishing items. That's a cost. Things don't just show up either. Like how much are paper towels? Well, take whatever your paper towels are. You need a system that makes that efficient, because it's not just going to show up back in the house, right? Is your crew going to get it? How's your crew going to get it? Are you going to send them every time with supplies? Okay, well, they're going to charge you more for that if it's an external person. if it's an internal person, what's the system you make for them to replenish those things and define it? Is the guest expecting 2 rolls of paper towels, or are they expecting 3 rolls of toilet paper per thing, or are they only going to get half when they show up and they need to go to the store? So tell them that. Tell your crew needs to know that. Your team needs to know that. So there needs to be a piece to it that matters. So, and then upkeep and maintenance. So that's really just, it's more than it sounds like, because you're in the house constantly, right? So you don't have, it's not like, long-term rental where you go a year and maybe you need to do a huge turnover and painting and all that stuff. And that's where people think it's lower maintenance. Well, yes, but it's shorter spurts of way higher use and traction. You may get a family of 12 in here for 3 days. Well, there's things that are going to happen. Like, we need to redo the ceiling on wood floors right now. One of our properties in a long-term rental probably wouldn't have been needed for 10 years. Well, it's needed after 3. It's because there's just really high traffic areas in this pool home. Things like that, paying attention to them. Pillows, sheets need to be replaced. There's a lot of wear and tear that goes into short-term rentals. So
yes, sir.
And you can't ignore it all, because you could be making a whole bunch of money while it's all good, and your profits will deteriorate as the property deteriorates if you don't do something about it. So
that's right.
Part of the day-to-day is reservation management, which we've kind of gotten into already. You got messaging, communications, but also collecting payments. Very rarely is it just, book everything, pay, you're good. That's what most people want. And you want to try to set up your listings that way to where there's not any added fees, but people ask for added things. And that's where it comes in. Like, they may
early check-ins,
late checkouts, parking passes, stuff like that. But the early check-in and early checkout late checkout, whatever it is the most common. And I've had a lot of conversations about why you have to charge for that, right? And there's situations where we don't charge for it. But most of the time we do, because what people don't understand is you're essentially discounting a day, because if you give a 4-hour late checkout, or like you could check out at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., whatever. Well, you're not having someone check in at 4 p.m. that day. That'd be extremely irresponsible, right? So in order to guarantee that in advance, you now need to block out the possibility of someone checking in that day, which means you're not getting paid that night. So is it going to be as much as a whole night? That's up to you to determine. Usually no, but one way we deal with it, just to peek into our operations, is we do not guarantee in advance. I'll guarantee it 72 hours or less before, based on our schedule, because a lot of times you can, when you're close in, you could see it, like checking out. They're asking for a late checkout on Sunday. Next guest isn't checking in until Monday afternoon. Okay, well
nobody's going to book one day because we don't allow that anyways.
Yeah, so yeah, you're either getting a late checkout and whatever, then, or you're not. And sometimes maybe those are ways to give perks to guests. When things go wrong, you give that to them for free. Whatever. Maybe you have a same day turnover that ended at they finish cleaning it at 1. Guest is there. Check-in's at 4. Okay, well, that just happened. I'm just going to let you go check in, whatever. Charging you for this seems, because then if it wasn't finished, I wouldn't be able to do that. So, so they're getting some value in whatever they're paying for. So.
But when we schedule that in advance, now maybe the cleaner has 8 turnovers that day that have to be done, right? And so the cleaner has to go do this particular property because they've paid for an early check-in. And then, maybe that's not the most ideal one to do that's next in their route, but they have to do it, right? And so
and sometimes they could be charging you more too. Like, you're charging the late checkout fee because now it has to be cleaned at 5 o'clock. Well, normally this cleaning crew would be check-ins are at 4, so normally they would be done. Maybe they have to pay their staff a little bit more to clean that at 5 o'clock or whatever it may be. So, managing that and then accounting for it and reporting it. If you manage a lot of these things, a lot of money going from different channels back and forth and whatever it may be, you got to account for that and report it. And if you're a management company, you got to report it to your clients.
That's right.
And do all that. So, but even if you're not, you should definitely be looking and accounting and reporting to yourself. It gives you transparency and insight into your own operations, because there's a lot of costs, as we've been saying. But, another cost of operating is taxes. Without accounting and reporting, taxes are hard.
It's been a big one lately. Huh?
It has been a big one. These cities and municipalities that are starting to
want a piece of the pie.
They want a big piece of the pie. They usually want a piece of your gross, right? Everybody wants a piece of your gross. And at the end of the day, there's a gross amount left for you. Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but it's your net. Your net's kind of gross.
It's kind of gross how they steal your money from you, isn't it?
Yeah, love it, right? And then that's not. We're not talking about when at the end of the year when you report to the federal government, because then you also need all this reporting. And
but what we're talking about is all part of the expenses of operating a short-term rental. I mean, that people don't think about and they don't even consider, right? Taxes is probably the last thing people consider.
I pay them monthly.
Those taxes, the ones that you pay annually, the ones you pay quarterly. I mean, there's lodging taxes. I mean, every city, state is different, and then you've got your federal taxes. So I know that people are out there right now, Kyle, touting the benefits of doing these short-term rentals. They're out there on Instagram, on TikTok, going, hey, look at me. I'm 24 years old. I own 6 Airbnbs, and I was able to quit my job, and I'm making 6 figures.
Yeah, and they love to show the payouts on Airbnb,
right.
Those Airbnb payouts. I love it. I love when I see those pictures and videos, because they just make me laugh. I'm like, I use those payouts section too when I do my reporting, but that is before you get all the deductions. It's like, now I paid all the cleaners. Now here's my maintenance for the month, and here's blah, blah, blah.
And by the way, maintenance, we kind of glossed over that, and I know we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but maintenance is way more intense on a short-term rental. I mean, you're talking landscaping. You don't have to pay on a long-term rental. Pest control, right? We're doing internet and all the utilities. You don't do those on long-term rentals. That right there is a huge expense every single month that you don't have on a long-term rental.
Yeah, electricity, that tends to be higher because people use the electricity in short-term rentals, just like in a hotel room. Who turns their lights off when they leave the hotel room, right? They treat Airbnbs the same way. They leave everything on. They got TVs running. They got They got all 7 of your TVs in the house on for who knows why, just because we're paying for this place.
Just open the door and let all the cold air out.
Let all the cold air out. Yeah, it adds up, but it's also speed and urgency. Because say your AC goes out, or something urgent happens that's going to affect the experience. You don't get to have time to make cost considerations. You don't have the luxury to use your, hopefully you have good people working with you, but you don't get to go get 3 quotes.
You gotta make fast decisions. Efficiency is the most important thing.
You want a bad review and refund, say, a $3,000 a week reservation because you want to spend the next week getting 3 quotes for a $6,000 AC unit, you can't do it. You can't do it. And there's not always a great solution that saves all of that happening. An AC unit going out is probably the worst case. But do you plan ahead? Do you have window units on hand? How much are you going to compensate people when things happen? That's a huge question of operations, is how much are you going to compensate people for things that happen? How are you going to make that determination? Because they will, and they will expect it. And one of the biggest things I've learned in operating is coming out ahead of, when someone pays for an experience and it's deficient, they are owed some compensation. So if you go out ahead of it and tell them what they're owed, most people are good on that, where if you make them ask, everyone's going to want a full refund, right? They're just going to see what they can get. That's what they're doing to you.
Yeah,
so because at the end of the day, they don't see you get either. Right. There's always this gap. Like they may have paid $3,000 and Airbnb took $500, and then taxes went $200. Blah blah blah. Your payout's $1,900.
Rightly so. They paid $3,000. It doesn't matter to them where it all goes and who's taking what. It doesn't really matter. They paid $3,000 for that experience, and that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm. That is it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cost of operating, and we're going to get further into those, and the one we didn't mention is management fees. You know, if you're self-managing, you don't have them. Hope maybe.
But if you're self-managing, I would say, I would claim, and I make this claim all the time, and I know it to be true, that you're probably not making as much revenue as you should and could be if somebody that was really good was managing it for you. Not just anybody. There's crappy managers out there, but you got somebody that really knows how to improve your revenue and do it in the most efficient way and has all the tools that we have. We're going to make you so much more money that the cost that you pay us to do it will almost, if it doesn't pay for itself, it may pay for itself, right? It probably will even exceed paying for itself. But it's impossible to really, to document and prove to somebody, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on that tool that I showed you and say, look at all these people that have like homes and they're making $15,000 and $18,000 and $22,000 a year, and I just made you 47.
Yeah, or you could just go do that same comparison in places where we have units, and we're just like, well, this tool just pulled up the top properties. It wasn't me.
Guess who's ours?
It just
Guess
happened
who's
to be
at the top?
all the top properties. But, but even, you know, if anything is a testament, even technically, we don't even self-manage. I mean, we pay a management fee to our own company, and as owners, we take the net, just like any of our clients. You know.
Yes, sir.
So we get to see that too. Treat it that way. So even I hire myself to do it.
Well, you're hiring your whole team to do it. So.
Exactly. So, and even, you know, whatever, do whatever you want. But
well, here's one we didn't talk about, Kyle. Just we're about done, right? You've gone through the list of operating. Here's one more. How about capital improvements?
Oof, yes.
Because we've done a lot of capital improvements on some of ours. We've ran them for 3, 4, 5 years. They've gotten beat up, and we've had to completely change out the floors or completely replace or repaint the whole place or change a bed, right? Right now we're doing some capital improvements on one of our units to see, you know, to spruce it up a little bit, to make it a little different. We've been running that thing for a long time the way it is. Like, how can we spruce this up and make it different, keep the same theme we have, but really make it stand out more? And we're putting some serious money into it, the backyard. Those are things that you want to do and have to do for these to improve and change the guest experience as you go along. If you want it to continue to generate revenue.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a single unit where we haven't done that. I mean, and we try to do it. Whether you do it, all at once, and we try to do it consistently. You know, we're constantly doing capital improvements. Makes the hits lower. You know, you take small hits every month. Doesn't feel like, but you know, it's being constantly updated and improved. Like carpets. You know, carpets have a way higher wear and tear in short-term rentals. You know, maybe they stain or whatever. You know, but they need to look at a higher degree than. They always need to look pretty new. You know, you always want them to look pretty new. Think of how much they're vacuumed, how much they're cleaned. You know, a lot of these things get cleaned 2-3 times a week. You know, even cleaning things deteriorates them. So it's all very important to the cost of operating your Airbnb and short-term rental, because you want to make sure it's successful, and recognizing all these things, because there's not a single thing we talked about today or that we will talk about that is free. You know, none of this all it takes time, labor, tools, money, whatever it may be. It all takes efforts, you know, and if you don't think about all the efforts it's going to take you, and you just watch the TikTok and you're like, you know, Airbnb arbitrage, you know, rent it, furnish it, profit, money in your bank account, blah, blah, blah. So
arbitrage is a whole nother topic we could talk about, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Kyle, I think that's why I think this is good. I mean, I feel like sometimes we maybe if somebody's listening to this, they might be thinking, wow, there's a lot more to this than I realized, or this is going to cost a lot more money. And I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that this is too much, because it's not. It's worth it. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. It's worth it. what we're trying to say is you need to be thinking about all the costs, be prepared for them, the time, labor, and money that it takes to do this right. You don't have to have all the tools we do. It's just going to be a little bit harder, a little less efficient, but you work your way into that. We didn't always have all these tools. So do it or hire somebody like us, but I'm not trying to discourage anybody from this. I don't want anybody to think that we just gave you a list of negatives and we're discouraging you. This is a great thing. The guy that's on TikTok saying, hey, look what I did, he's not entirely wrong. I just think he's only painting the rosy picture. Mm-hmm. And he's not telling you what the other side looks like as well.
Yeah, doing all these things right help boost revenue to help pay for them. Right. You know, so at the end of the day, it's looking at what it takes to do anything. You know,
that's right.
And make sure you do it, because we can do all these things all day. You got a unit that's not useful to people in an area that it's not needed. It doesn't matter how good you operate.
That's right.
You picked the wrong.
That's
piece.
Right. That's right. You're exactly right.
Well, this interests everybody, or you want to give us a call and discuss, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. And then, or tune in next week where we are going to dive into some actual figures, some actual costs of operating, some actual costs of setup, some actual monthly and annual amounts.
The real money, huh?
We're going to take our rentals, our statements. We're not going to say who they're for and all that stuff, but they're properties that we operate
real
at different
examples.
levels. New ones, some that we've operated for years, some that we set up this year, just to give you
Can't wait.
an idea of this is it. This is the meat and potatoes. This is actually how we're doing it, and it's actually being done. This is how money's actually flowing in, flowing out, and into people's pockets. So
love it.
If you want to tune in on that, I'll see you next week.
Good discussion, Kyle. Thank you.
Of course. Bye.